We are so thankful to have everyone with us this evening and joining us here on this week's episode of College Journey Conversations. We're super excited to have our guest with us today, Jamie Hewitt from ICRE, and we're pretty excited to have him. Jamie, did I even pronounce the last name correctly? I think I did, but I'm really not sure.
It's Height. It's a good German name.
I'm not even sure what I said. What did I say? I can't even remember.
I don't remember either.
I'm glad we don't remember. Let's not rewind and find out, right? Jamie, it's a pleasure to have you tonight. I know we're encountering some technical difficulties just right as we're beginning. So for all of our viewers, just hang with us. If things go awry, we'll be right back and continue the conversation. Tonight, we're going to have a conversation. We are back now live, Jamie. I'm so sorry. My goodness, we're going to walk our way through this one tonight, I think. Maybe even tiptoe our way through this one, but I'm glad we're back, right? So I'm not exactly sure where we left off, but I'm super excited to have you, Jamie, tonight. We're going to be talking a lot about a particular software online that assists students in their writing ability and writing skills. My apologies to our viewers for technical difficulties. Again, it seems like we're kind of coming in and out. We're having some issues here in the Peachtree City area, apparently, and I apologize for that. It's like my worst nightmare, right? When we go live, and I haven't had a trouble with this all day long, and when you go live, it just suddenly starts to happen. Let's see. Jamie, tell us a little bit about kind of where you're broadcasting yourself from, and where are you at right now located?
So hi everyone, I'm Jamie. Pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I like to talk about writing a lot. I think it's a super important subject to cover as a citizen, as a parent, and of course as a teacher. So thanks for having me on the show. And to answer your question, I'm in Durham, North Carolina. So Duke University is about 50 yards that way. I can see it from my house, and it's a beautiful town. It's a town that's changing and a good place to call home.
Nice. So you have been involved in, I think some of your profile that I read up on a little bit kind of speaks a lot about your journey as it relates to kind of identifying ways to make people's processes more efficient through technology. And tell us kind of like how you've become the CEO, the co-founder of ICRE, and kind of the journey you've been on to get where you are today.
Yeah, it's an unexpected one. I can tell you that I certainly, if you could rewind the clock to coming out of college and ask me, what are you going to do in 20 years? I would not guess this. So life is full of surprises, but it actually is relevant. It's a surprise that grew out of a specific set of experiences as an educator. So what I thought I would do is just kind of tell a bit of the backstory about ICRE. Where did this, how do you cook something like this up, especially if you're like, it's not anywhere near what you're planning on doing. And then hopefully that can kind of lead us into some things that might be on folks' mind this evening. So I was in graduate school in Princeton way back in 2002. And yeah, not everyone, most people are training to be instructors. We're going to be professors in this discipline or that discipline. And I think I may have lost you again. I shall.
We're okay right now, I think.
We're good. All right. Yeah, so I'm training to be a teacher in the classroom. I'm going to teach literature, philosophy, or some combination of these types of subjects. And the word goes around amongst the graduate student population that the local community college had, someone dropped the course like 2 days before it's going to start. They're like, if you want classroom experience, we need you to show up on Monday. And I'm thinking everybody's going to apply for this because, what an opportunity, what an opening to get practical classroom experience. We know what we learn in the hallowed halls of Princeton, but what does that mean when you're actually in a classroom talking with students and working across any number of considerations and opportunities? So I fill out my application, and I was the only one that put in for this. And I rolled up Monday evening to the Trenton campus. Here I am, this 22-year-old graduate student walking into an urban community college. And I can still remember that feeling like I have no idea how to take all the stuff I've learned in the classroom and talk about it in a way that's relevant to this world I've entered into. Right? I know what the book says, but we're not in the book, we're in the classroom. And how do we as educators navigate that transition? And in some ways, it's kind of like, well, duh, you should have known better. And in other ways, that's not something they teach you in class. So it was a really formative experience for me for several reasons that I like to highlight. And the first is just education happens in the classroom, quote unquote, but also literally. I mean, the classroom, the definition has expanded, obviously, in the past year and a half. But the idea is we as teachers are working with students. Like for everything else that's going on in education, at the end of the day, it's about people working closely together to develop a skill. And that's not necessarily what they teach you in Princeton's classrooms. That's what you learn when you're working with students one-on-one. So I learned the value of sort of contextualizing the educational experience. Students have any number of curiosities, any number of specific concerns, areas for development, strengths, weaknesses, etc. So how do you as an educator really lean into that variety? That's a tough thing to do, especially if you don't know what you're doing. Again, I learned that lesson very, very quickly in about the first 30 minutes of the classroom. This was an English composition class, so I also got tossed into the deep end about the grading process. And everyone kind of gets this, but I'm going to sort of share the secrets of someone who's lived to tell the tale. And I can still picture, my first assignment, I believe it was, an essay on one of Jefferson's letters, or something about the founding fathers. Let's look at a text and talk about it, and you have to tell me what you think about it. And my supervisor said, "Oh yeah, how long is it going to be? When's the deadline?" And I said, "I think I'm going to offer to read drafts for all my students if they get them in, before the paper's due." And he's like, "That's a terrible idea." And again, the theory of education, of course, the teacher should help, right? That's what we're here for. That's what we're paid for. In practice, as you can guess, I was snowed in, starting about 48 hours out, I was just grading constantly. And because of the rule, if I graded one, I had to be willing to grade all, right? This is a matter of fairness to everyone. So, and that's what my supervisor was trying to telegraph, and I didn't pick up on as a naive graduate student. So it was a fundamental disjunction between what I should be doing and what I wanted to do, what those students needed me to do, and the realities of my role. I had 30 students, it's 20 minutes per draft, 20 times, let's say only 24 submit. You can start to do math however you want. And what ultimately comes out of that process is the amount of time I'm spending per paper is not sufficient to help students improve. Like for everything else that's going on, it's a math game. I don't have enough hours in my day to do my job to the degree I need to do it for everyone. And because I have to give something to everyone, what does that mean? Everyone gets a little bit less than they need. So they don't develop the skill. And so they don't improve the next time around. So it's kind of one negative feedback loop after another. We're digging this hole that no one can get out of. So that's a problem. And then what I've learned over the years of doing this this being teaching, this being grading, is for all of the skills that students will learn in school, writing is the single most important one. If you're going to be a chemical engineer, good for you. I respect folks like that a great deal because my brain simply can't work like that. I mean, it's just doctors, hats off to you, mathematicians, well done. But everyone's going to have to talk to other people, and we communicate, especially now, but even back then, via writing. We send emails, we're online. The currency of our digital world is the written word. So this skill is deeply important, and you can look at studies, and there's lots of them, but in terms of getting into schools, in terms of accelerating once you're in terms of graduating and launching into the next step, getting a job, getting a promotion, all of these things that feature the skill, the characteristic that correlates most strongly with success is good communication skills. You know, go Google the open positions at Google or anywhere else. Communication skills, the most desired attribute of a candidate, and you can probably guess what the skill that is most lacking in the typical applicant is. It's good communication skills. So this really matters. I can't stress that enough. I've seen it matter, and when I worked my poor graduate fingers to the bone helping students along, they just excel. It was perceptible, it was obvious. The problem, of course, is how do we, and we as educators, but also we in the collective sense of the term, achieve that knowing that those teachers don't scale, right? The thing that students need is a resource that we can't make more of. I would love to have 30 hours in my day. I can't. And the more I work out of the 24 I do have, the more my performance degrades, right? So there's a very kind of human problem here to address. And that's the lesson I saw and thought about for a decade or more in the classroom. And it's ultimately why I left the classroom, because at some point, whatever magic moment I had, I said that you have to use technology for part of this, because otherwise we can't reach those students to the degree we need to reach them. And if we can find a way for technology to do, not everything I do as a teacher, that was never our goal. And I'm suspicious of anybody who says technology can replace the human brain in full. But I thought, if there's like 100% of this task and technology can do some significant percentage of that task, well, then all of my time can go to the thing that technology can't do. And I can't make more time, but I can be more efficient with the time I do have. So rather than try and do everything in 10 minutes, what if I can spend those 10 minutes focusing on the two things that the student really needs help with? And those two things can unlock all these benefits. And that's really what we set out to achieve at Acree.
I'm not sure our viewers are actually aware of what truly is all about. So I'm going to share my screen, and I've never done this on our live broadcast before, so this will be one of the first things that we do. And again, my sincere apologies. We're still kind of having this technical issue that I can't even explain. So we're talking about technology, and technology isn't working for us. So it's really an ironic evening. So I appreciate everyone's patience with everything. So let me go ahead, and I want to share a brief video on what Acree is all about. Okay, stand by just for a second, and let's listen to this.
Do you want to be a better writer, be consistent in quality engagement from a resource that can help you identify what is good or what is bad about your writing? A lot of the grading software that's been created before falls into two categories. Either they have to train their system with a lot of example essays, or else they look at topical elements such as style, spelling, grammar, which really doesn't check argumentation and quality of the essay. It's a website you can go on and use, and it's as simple as can be. And it works on iPad, it works on any of your tablets, your mobile phone. You can grab your essays from Dropbox or from Google Docs. We're looking at the mechanisms of good argumentation. And because of that, we're grading the essays and giving feedback the way a good teacher would. Our company's big mission is to democratize education. We want to give this resource to anybody access to the internet. If you want to become a better writer, we want you to have access to a tool that will help you become a better writer.
Yeah, I'm just fascinated by the details. I mean, there's a 1 minute or so of description of what Acree is all about. And, I love a couple of things that you mentioned in there, and I'd love to talk a little bit more in terms of equity and how you're providing this resource to students across the board who need help with their writing. I'd love to hear more about that. And I also like to hear a little bit about the details on how in the world can the computer or this particular software identify how best to write an essay for me? I mean, today, just as an example, I conducted a workshop today, several students on college essay development, and we did some brainstorming and all of that, and they're still kind of struggling through, what that particular essay is all about. And I know that, as a parent myself with high school students and middle school students, that they're coming home all the time. Mom, Dad, I got to write this essay. I got to write this paper, and I have no idea where to start. And how is it that Acree can come alongside of a student in those moments and really kind of push them through the writing process and really truly improve their ability to write over time?
I mean, great questions. And I sort of marvel at the technology every time I stop and think about it. I'm not the technical side of the team, so it's fairly amazing to me that someone was able to construct what has been constructed. But we can speak to, I can speak to some of these things. I can tell you what we were able to think about in terms of what we wanted to build, because it does matter, and hopefully it'll give folks listening in a sense of, if a student uses this, what actually will he or she get out of it? Right? Is it just a super Grammarly? And the answer to that question is no, but I'll spoil the movie and I'll come back to the movie in just a second.
Yeah.
So when we were thinking about how do you do this, and Robin, my co-founder, touched on it briefly in the clip you played, but we really stepped back and thought about a couple of key considerations. One is just access. Right, you want a resource to be as easy to use as possible. And in graduate school, I tutored writing off to the side. It was good extra money as a graduate student. But again, there's issues of access. There's issues of equality. Right, I was expensive, so not everybody can afford that hour of my time.
Right.
And if a bunch of people want that hour, well, I'm going to sell it to the highest bidder, because again, I can't do it for all. So I'm going to do it for the best I can given the circumstances. So we really wanted to build a piece of technology that was as easy to use as possible. And that's the power of the internet. The whatever gremlins I've sort of brought in tonight, I apologize if I crossed the universe, but it generally works, right? And we can access things reliably, efficiently, and cheaply. So how do we create, as Robin called it, a Jamie brain that kind of lives in the universe? And the concept sounds cool. It is cool, but the technology, that's really, really tricky stuff, right? Because you've graded, I don't even want to guess how many thousands of papers. I did count how many I've graded, and it's a big number, and I don't like to think about it. But teaching writing is a skill that requires a lot of training. I often use the example of analogy of a musical instrument. It's not something you just pick up and do. It takes years of practice to learn those foundational skills, and then you build on top of them. And eventually you get to the point where you can guide others in acquiring the skill. I think about writing in the same way. So how do you replicate expertise? It's a horribly tricky problem. And fortunately, I met Robin.
Right.
We were both doing our PhDs at Glasgow in the UK, and he just had one of these brains that, as we were talking about this problem, he kind of found the path through. I mean, that doesn't mean anything, but it means everything sort of thing. I don't know how he did it, but he was able to sort of model what my brain does when I read a paper. It doesn't model everything, of course. We always emphasize that, and I did just a few minutes ago, but the point is the technology can model a lot of what I'm going to do. So if you can put 70% of the process online to everyone, that's a huge win. And the real, the approach we took, which is unique to our technology, and I'll start with a technical term and then I'll explain it, because it's a boring technical term, but it actually does matter. So we used what we call a rules-based engine. So
Okay.
we didn't set out to look for patterns across student writing. We didn't want to feed an algorithm 1,000 papers and let the algorithm figure out, the A papers always do this or B papers always do this. We looked at the rules of good writing, and fortunately they're published online. Every state has them. Every middle school and high school student will encounter a standardized exam that will have an essay or more required. And those states will have the rules for those exercises available online. If you're taking the AP exams, the rubrics are online. Rubric is the word that it gets used in education, right? There's a rubric for this exercise, and that just means, the grid that says you have to do this, and if you do this in this way, you get this many points. So we literally collected all the rules. I mean, I had 200 rubrics, I kid you not, and they were all laid out on my floor. And my wife was like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I understand why you're making fun of me, but this will make sense." And what we were doing is, looking at all of these different understandings, so to speak, of good writing. And I said, can we make something that's 90% plus similar to every single one of these documents? Is there a general sense in our culture of what good writing entails? And it actually turned out to be a lot easier than I thought, because the answer is yes. We've spent centuries as an intellectual culture defining a good argument. And you don't have to go get a PhD or work in the classroom for 20 years. You can turn on a Law and Order TV show. And as I always ask my students when I taught them, how do lawyers make arguments in those shows? And say, well, they make an opening statement, they present their evidence, and then they make a closing statement. That's all it is. It's that simple in terms of the basic construct. So we know the rules. Now we just have to figure out how to assess them algorithmically. And that's, of course, the big technical breakthrough that we achieved. And I won't dwell on that, because it's about what are the key things a good piece of writing needs to have. You state your position, what we would call a thesis statement. You develop that thesis statement or that position with evidence. You explain why your evidence is supporting your point, and then you summarize your argument at the end and leave your reader with a thought. Right, and that's kind of those are the guardrails that we want to help students with a CRE. It's not the only way to write a good essay. I'll be the first to admit that. I always say to students, to parents, to colleagues who question, well, aren't you just teaching students kind of a boring way to write? And I say, no, I'm teaching them an effective way to write. Yeah. There are other very clever ways, potentially more powerful ways to do this, but we're talking about something you can always go back to. It works every single time. And it works on an essay, it works on a college application statement, it works in emails, et cetera, et cetera. Right. Again, go back and watch the A Few Good Men sequence, right? It's about evidence. It's about making opening statements and starting to move your audience towards where you want to get them with a structured approach. So what does a CRE do? It helps students with those foundational elements. That's all it does. So for the introduction, does the student have the 4 or 5 key elements of a good introduction? If they do, we say, good job, here's what you did well. So we're always reminding students about their successes, so those underlying conceptual muscles get built. And if there's a shortcoming, we say, hey, you need help here. This is what it should be. Here's why it isn't that. So what can you change to make this part of your paragraph good? Right. And we do that for every single paragraph. So you can't miss it. It's direct, it's located right where the problem is, and it's focusing again on argumentation and organization and analysis, those kind of higher order skills that all of those exams are going to be testing with those essays. That when you get to college, for those high school parents, I can promise you that first year, your student is going to write at least one and probably many, 2 to 10 page papers where they're going to have to do this exercise. And it might be on Romeo and Juliet, it might be on the Civil War, it might be on some psychological theory or some economic concept, but the basic skill, especially early in college, that's what you're going to get hit with. So what do you want to start working on in high school? Start to develop just, again, those underlying muscles and have the ability to compose a good essay on just about any topic. And that's what Accree really wants to help students do.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Now, how I mentioned earlier, and we heard on that short video as well, that making it available to students across the board is something that is kind of a dream of yours and a hope for Accree to be able to do. How and in what ways are you making that available to I guess one might say the masses for that?
It's a great question, and it has been a goal we've kept working towards since 2014 when we founded the company. And yeah, I guess the reveal I can offer, it's not up on the website yet because we're still, I'll explain that in a second, but we have launched a Google Chrome plugin for free. So students can install it into their browser, and when they open up a Google Doc to draft their essay, they can use Accree. So it's out there. If you look on the Google Chrome store, you can find it. Our website will be updated in the next couple of weeks to reflect this, and the link will be front and center. We're not doing that just yet because we want to get teething problems out of the way. It's a complicated piece of technology. So it is available. We're just not talking about it too much just yet. But that's what we're going to do.
We're not going to say a single thing about it here. So let's not try to spread that news at all. No, that sounds like a great plugin.
Yeah, no, it's for, and it does a very basic job, and we want that job to be done for everyone, and why would Accree do that? It's a fair question. I'm sure a couple people are wondering, right? If it's that powerful technology, why would you give it away? And I have two answers. One is I'm a teacher and I believe in what we're doing. I've seen my own kids struggle as they start to learn how to write in the pandemic. Parents, and I say this as a parent who is a writing teacher, parents are not good writing teachers. It's
that's the truth.
So I understand in a very deep level how stressful helping a student can be, especially when that student is your own child.
Right.
So I want to help folks. I want to help the students. And of course, we're a business. Of course, we're going to try to make money off of that. And what we'll do is offer premium services to those who want them. Right. So you can use it for free. And if you want more help, that's when we're going to charge you. But if you just want it, and you never want to talk to me or put in your credit card information, that's totally fine. It's there on Google. If you go to the Chrome store, you'll be able to find it. And if you're tuned out for the summer, which a lot of students are, just check the website, and in a couple of weeks, there'll be that big button right there in the middle to go find it.
That's awesome. That's good stuff. That's good news, Jamie. I mean, it's great that students will have access to that like immediately, and they won't have to go hunt for that very much. And that's a great resource for students to have. Now, here's a tough question, perhaps, and it's kind of I know you're like, great, right? But
no, I always encourage tough questions.
Maybe it's not a tough question, but for me, it sounds a little tough, at least in my head. So what about that student? Now, we want to hope that by using Accree and that software, that students would have great success in writing. They would turn in their papers and they would come back with, the awesome looking A+ on the top of it, well done, and get all excited and frame it. But what would you say about those who do everything that Accree is suggesting in terms of recommendation and writing, and that paper comes back not so A+y?
I'd say the student is learning, and that's the point.
Good.
It's a fair question, and maybe it's an entirely different session for another 6 months or whenever in the future. Yeah, I think grades do more harm than good in education because it's very easy to understand the learning process as a number.
Right.
And one of my all-time favorite teachers in my own experience was my second philosophy professor in graduate school, and he gave us 2 grades on our paper. And the first was like, in the last page that's face up. So you flip to the end, you see the grade. And he said, this is the grade that went in the grade book. And then if you flipped it over to the very back, he said, this is the grade you actually deserve. And that's where all the comments were. And it was such a wonderful game. And so if you just want to score, I get it. Or we have a system, a culture that encourages that. As an educator, as a business person, as a philosopher, as a lot of different things. I want to get as many students as possible into the mindset of flipping over to the back and seeing what do I really need to work on.
Right.
Because what I can tell the students listening in, what I can tell the parents of the students who are here, if you can get your kids to focus on what is on the back of the page, not the score, forget about the score, focus on what the score represents, which is the quality of the work, and then use that as the avenue into what needs to be improved.
Right.
If you can get into that mindset, a growth mindset, a learning mindset, whatever it's called, whatever you want to call it, the language can change. And I may have just made a horrible mistake. I apologize if I did. But it's about learning and struggling through. Again, writing is not something that you're going to just get in a single paper. Go back to the musical instrument exercise. If you watch a YouTube video and you can play some song perfectly, have you learned to play the instrument?
Right.
I would say no. You've learned to do a specific thing. And what I always told my own students in the classroom is my goal is to get you to the point where you can do this without me. And that's, again, the whole idea here is build those underlying muscles, because teachers are really, really helpful. But at some point, your teacher's not there with you.
Correct.
Right? When you have to write that paper in college and you can't stay after class because it's 1 o'clock in the morning and your teacher's asleep and not offering to read every draft, which a lot of teachers do. What do you do when you get your first job and your boss says, I need a 2-page summary of key customer service requests for the past week? What are you going to do?
Right.
And at that point, it's not about a grade. It's about, can you communicate the required information efficiently and hopefully not too quickly, but often you don't have a lot of time. So
Right.
What do? Everything that we talked about for, well, not the SAT anymore, RIP, SAT, essay, but those freshman year comp classes into the AP, into whatever else. It's, you communicate your position and you explain your ideas concisely, make sure you're connecting your thoughts, and that's exponentially more important than the grade you get on the paper.
Yeah, I can see where some students might see this particular software as maybe a cheat sheet to be able to get their essay written. But I kind of see it more as a roadmap and not a cheat sheet. Would that be an accurate kind of description?
It would be, and it's one of those great trick questions that I get asked sometimes. So thank you for bringing it up. It's not a cheat sheet for 2 reasons. One is technologically, a CRE never quote unquote does the work for the student. So if the student wants something that will just fix everything, a CRE is not for you. It's designed to help students learn, which means students have to do the work because that's how you learn. So just to be clear, it won't fix up your essay for you. It'll tell you how to fix up your essay. And then the second thing is, know the context of the exercise you're doing. Those rubrics are highly tuned and vetted, and those are the rules. So if someone says you have to do this, and then you use those rules to do just that, you're not cheating, you're meeting expectations.
Correct.
If you have someone else do that for you, that's cheating. But if you tell me you have to write 3 paragraphs, 1 on the Gettysburg Address, 1 on the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and 1 on Hamilton, and I do that, you can't give me a bad grade because I've done exactly what you've asked me to do. Well, you might give me a bad grade, but then I can contest it because I met expectations. And that's the whole thing, right? It's right there in front of us. It's one of those things that I want to encourage every parent listening in, even if you never look at a CRE or your students think it's horrible, remember that the rules are in plain sight and go look at them because they'll tell you exactly what you need to work on.
Yeah. And students, they sit in their rooms and really stress out over how it is they're going to get a particular paper done. Even when they have the prompt sitting right in front of them, or they've actually had a discussion in class about the subject matter. Still very much, I guess you might say, handicapped in being able to get things started, get things rolling, even if they get an introductory paragraph completed. What next, and how do you structure that next paragraph? I think, just kind of add on to that. I think of the student who had everything written perfect that I spoke with not long ago, who could not close it. Like they couldn't figure out how to wrap it up in that final conclusion. And this is something that a CRE actually walks the student through step by step and really kind of gauges the results of what they've written, and in some ways scores what they've written. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, as I reviewed it and actually used this before, it gives it a color of red, green, or yellow in terms of
Yep.
whether or not you need to start over or you're right on track, or
Yeah.
you could use some improvement. And what a better way to kind of walk yourself through an essay project or a paper project for that matter, than to use a coach right at your desk in your room without having to call up the teacher, right? Which we really don't want to have to happen.
Yeah. Well, especially at 1 o'clock in the morning, which
Especially at 1 o'clock in the morning.
we can see this in our logs that come 10:30, 11 p.m., usage just starts to go up.
Right.
Most people aren't available to help with essays at that point.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to come back to this thread in a more structured way in terms of what a CRE does, because it was actually the first major addition to the platform we made. Originally, it was the whole give students feedback on those rubric items, and that's the feedback off to the side. How's your thesis statement, et cetera. But the number one point of frustration and critical feedback we got early on was, that's great if I've written the paper, but what if I'm having trouble just starting the writing process? You know, it's the blank screen problem. If I've been looking at the screen for an hour and it's blank, the CRE can't help me.
Right.
And we said, that's a completely good point. That's fair. And what can we do about that? So what we do now is differentiate between, and this will be a technical term, so I apologize, but for the sake of clarity, hopefully it's helpful. Assessment, which is kind of what the student has written. Is it green, yellow, or red in terms of the quality of the thesis statement, analysis, et cetera. And then what we call writing assistant, which is a separate functionality, a separate interface off to the bottom right-hand side of the screen that walks the student through the writing process. So assessment is about what's been done, and that's content specific, right? How's your essay on George Washington? You have to talk about George Washington. Writing assistant is, how do you write the essay from wherever you are? So the simple example, let's come back to the blank screen. You know, if you're looking at that blank screen for 45 minutes and you're like, I don't know what to do. It's 1 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Well, you just click a button and Writing Assistant will say, you know, do this. It's a concrete step. Of course, you still have to do it, but if you do this thing, then that will move you to the next state of the writing process. And of course, as you're switching around paragraph type, the guidance will shift. But it's just a step by step kind of a hand-holding exercise. You know, so move from state 1 to state 2. Well, now how do I get to state 3? Well, here's the next thing you can do. And it's just that kind of, again, there's a fair amount of structure to how this works in a basic sense, right? And so get the basics out, and then you can go back and elaborate and strengthen and kind of be yourself. But as I always told my students, if you're ever panicked, and you know, if you're going to take an AP exam, your student might be panicked, take 5 minutes. And we actually have a video on our YouTube channel. I believe it's still up. It was called Write an Essay in 2 Minutes, right? And it's me walking through this process. It's like, you can get a couple of these stakes in the ground, that kind of outlining or pre-writing process. And that's what this writing assistant technology is really focused on, right? There's some reliable steps along the way that if you feel completely overwhelmed, again, you can always retreat to them and they'll work for any type of writing, I promise. And go look up the video. You really can do this in 2 minutes. And the game was, you know, someone at a CRE said, I'm just going to give you a random question. Let's see if you can really do it. And I hadn't seen it and I was like, okay, done.
Right.
And so take a few minutes and think about it. And then again, there's a piece of technology that will hold that student's hand through the process, which I don't have kids that are up at 2 a.m. writing essays just yet, but I expect when they are doing that, I'm going to be glad they can turn this on and not get me out of bed, because I won't be very helpful at 2 o'clock in the morning writing about Romeo and Juliet.
Well, we all know that from our own educational experiences, that getting into college and getting into grad school, you're going to spend quite a bit of time behind the computer screen, starting essays from scratch. starting papers from scratch and walking all the way through to that conclusive comment, and how to get from point A to point B. I can't tell you how many times I wish I had someone sitting next to me whispering the next step in my ear, and then guiding me throughout the process and giving me coachable skills and critique along the way to get me to the finish line. So we're super grateful for it, Jamie. We're super grateful that you are here with us tonight. I'm so glad things ironed out on our technology issue. If you've been listening and you go to the beginning, you'll find that it gets a little choppy, but we're super glad that ended. Jamie, how would someone, either a parent, a student, an educator, a consultant like myself who works with students all the time, how would they either set up for themselves an account or one for themselves to actually do the work that we've been speaking about? What would they do? Where would they go? What would they do? Kind of outline that real quick for us.
Yeah, happy to do so. So as mentioned, that Chrome plugin is available, and we'll have the new website up in a couple of weeks that will put the button so obvious you can't miss it. So in a couple of weeks, click the button, install the plugin, and then when you open up Google Docs, it's pretty straightforward. There's an explainer video in the Google, the page in the store, whatever that's called.
Yeah.
So, and that'll just walk through how do you actually go from installing to getting started.
Okay.
If you want to go to Acree.com, because you like the plugin, you want the sort of personalized learning recommendations that Acree can provide behind the paywall, you just create an account, and that account will should sync with your Google account if you want to use them in conjunction. If you just want to work at Acree.com, obviously you'll be able to do that. And from there, you'll have a word processing environment that you can kind of get in, and all these functionalities will be there for you. If you have any questions, you can go to our website and click the contact us link that will come in to the team. And we have a great team here to kind of answer questions and guide folks through the process. So feel free to be in touch if there are follow-up questions, or if something just isn't making sense. We're always here to answer.
Anybody can reach out to me here at Capstone Educational Consultants. I would be more than happy to forward any questions or comments you might have onto Jamie, and get you connected with him and or Acree directly. We love working with Acree here and can help you out in any way. Jamie, once again, we're super glad that you joined us tonight. Thank you for sharing all about your adventure in creating and designing a resource for students and educators alike in becoming better communicators. We're grateful for you and grateful to have that resource. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us here at Capstone Educational Consultants on this evening's edition of College Journey Conversations. Y'all have a great evening.
Bye, everyone.